Picture this. It's 790,000 years ago, and a small group of early humans huddles in terror as lightning splits the sky above them. The forest around them erupts in flames, and they should be running for their lives. But one curious individual does something that will change the course of human history forever. They reach toward the dancing flames instead of away from them. That single moment of courage over fear didn't just warm their hands, it ignited the spark that would transform our species from frightened scavengers into the masters of the planet. Imagine you're living 790,000 years ago in what we now call Israel. You're part of a small band of early humans, Homo erectus, and your world is harsh, unpredictable, and dangerous. Your ancestors have survived for millions of years, but they've done so by following one basic rule: avoid the Red Death. That's what they might have called fire, the mysterious, destructive force that consumed forests, killed animals, and brought nothing but devastation. But on this particular day, everything changes. A lightning storm has just passed through your territory, leaving behind something unprecedented, a controlled burn that's slowly consuming a fallen tree. Most of your group does what instinct tells them to do. They back away, ready to flee. But one individual, driven by curiosity rather than fear, does something extraordinary. They approach the flames. We can't know their name or exactly what they looked like, but archaeological evidence from sites like Kesem Cave in Israel suggests that this moment or moments like it happened repeatedly until someone finally made the connection. The key wasn't just discovering fire, it was recognizing that fire could be controlled, maintained, and used as a tool rather than feared as a destroyer. What made this discovery so revolutionary wasn't the fire itself, but the cognitive leap it represented. For the first time in human history, our ancestors had to overcome their most basic survival instincts. Fire meant danger, every fiber of their being screamed at them to run. But somehow, they managed to push past that fear and see opportunity, where others saw only threat. The archaeological record shows us evidence of this transformation at sites across Africa, Asia, and eventually Europe. Hearths, burnt bones, and heat-old stones tell the story of humans who learned to capture lightning in their hands. These weren't just random accidents anymore, they were deliberate acts of control over one of nature's most powerful forces. The transition from accidental discovery to intentional use wasn't immediate or easy. Think about it, these early humans didn't have matches, lighters, or even the knowledge that rubbing two sticks together could create sparks. They had to figure out how to keep fires burning once they found them, and more importantly, how to transport them safely from place to place. Archaeological evidence suggests that early firekeepers developed sophisticated techniques for maintaining continuous flames. They learned which materials burned longest, how to bank fires for overnight burning, and crucially, how to carry fire safely during migrations. This knowledge became so valuable that it likely created the first specialists in human society, the firekeepers who held the survival of their entire group in their hands. The psychological impact was just as significant as the practical. 1. Fire represented humanity's first real victory over the natural world. For millions of years, our ancestors had been at the mercy of their environment. Cold when it was cold, dark when it was dark, vulnerable when predators prowled. Fire changed all of that. Suddenly, humans could push back against nature's limitations, but mastering fire required more than just overcoming fear. It demanded unprecedented cooperation and communication. Maintaining a fire was a group effort that required planning, resource gathering, and coordinated action. Someone had to collect fuel, someone had to tend the flames, and someone had to guard this precious resource from wind, rain, and rival groups who might want to steal it. This cooperation around fire likely accelerated the development of human language and social structures. Complex fire management required detailed communication about timing, resources, and responsibilities. The hearth became humanity's first classroom, where knowledge was shared, skills were taught, and plans were made. Around those flickering flames, our ancestors learned to think and act as a unified group rather than just individual survivors. The archaeological evidence for humanity's mastery of fire is literally written in stone and ash. Sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa show evidence of controlled fire use dating back over 1 million years, while locations across Europe and Asia reveal increasingly sophisticated fire technologies as humans spread across the globe. What makes this evidence so compelling isn't just the presence of burned materials, it's the patterns they reveal. Early fire sites show clear signs of intentional construction, carefully arranged stones to contain flames, specific locations chosen for ventilation and safety, and evidence of repeated use over long periods. These weren't accidental wildfires. They were deliberate human creations. The bone evidence is particularly fascinating. When humans began cooking with fire, the microscopic structure of animal bones changed in ways that are still detectable today. Burned bones from archaeological sites show specific heat patterns that could only result from controlled cooking fires, not natural blazes. Even more revealing, the types of bones found at these sites shift dramatically. Suddenly, humans were consuming parts of animals that would have been inedible without cooking. Stone tools from fire use in sites also tell a remarkable story. Heat treatment of stones, a process that makes them easier to shape and sharpen, appears in the archaeological record alongside evidence of controlled fire use. This suggests that our ancestors quickly learned to use fire not just for warmth and cooking, but as a tool for improving their other technologies. Perhaps most importantly, the geographic distribution of fire sites reveals how quickly this knowledge spread. Within relatively short periods, archaeological evidence shows fire use appearing across vast distances, suggesting that groups were actively sharing this life-changing technology. Fire became humanity's first global innovation, spreading from group to group until it transformed our entire species. Asterisk. The accidental discovery of fire wasn't just a moment of curiosity satisfied, it was the beginning of humanity's transformation. From another species struggling for survival into the dominant force on Earth, that single act of reaching toward the flames, instead of away from them, set in motion a chain of changes that would ultimately lead to everything we recognize as human civilization. The moment our ancestors figured out how to cook food, everything changed. And I mean everything. Before fire, early humans were limited to what they could eat: raw, tough roots, bitter leaves, and meat that was often partially rotten by the time they could safely consume it. Their jaws were massive, their teeth were built for grinding, and they spent most of their waking hours just trying to extract enough nutrition to survive. But cooking transformed food from survival fuel into something extraordinary. Heat broke down tough plant fibers, making previously inedible materials suddenly nutritious. Proteins became more digestible, starches converted to sugars, and toxins that would have been deadly when raw became harmless after exposure to flames. For the first time in human history, our ancestors could access the full nutritional potential of their environment. The impact on human evolution was immediate and dramatic. Archaeological evidence shows that within relatively short periods after fire mastery, human jaw sizes began shrinking while brain sizes increased. This wasn't coincidence, it was cause and effect. Cooked food required less chewing and provided more calories per bite, freeing up energy that could be redirected toward growing and maintaining larger, more complex brains. Consider the caloric mathematics. Raw meat provides roughly 20 to 30% less usable energy than cooked meat. For early humans operating on razor-thin survival margins, this difference was literally life or death. A cooked meal could provide enough extra calories to support pregnancy, childhood development, and the energy-intensive process of maintaining complex social relationships. Asterisk. Cooking also dramatically expanded the human diet. Tubers, grains, and other plant materials that were previously off-limits became dietary staples. This wasn't just about variety, it was about survival security. Groups that could cook had access to food sources that non-fire-using groups couldn't touch, giving them massive advantages during times of scarcity. But perhaps most importantly, cooking created the first human surplus. For the first time in evolutionary history, humans could extract more energy from food than they expended acquiring it. This surplus energy became the foundation for everything we think of as distinctly human: art, complex toolmaking, elaborate social structures, and the luxury of having time to think about things beyond immediate survival. Before fire, night was humanity's greatest enemy. As darkness fell, our ancestors became prey rather than predators. They were forced to seek shelter in caves, climb trees, or huddle together in vulnerable groups while lions, leopards, and other nocturnal hunters owned the landscape. Fire changed this dynamic completely, turning humans from frightened prey into apex predators. The psychological impact of controlling fire cannot be overstated. For the first time in human history, our ancestors could create light on demand. They could extend daylight hours, illuminate dark spaces, and create safe zones that predators would not dare approach. Archaeological evidence from sites across Africa shows that once humans mastered fire, they began occupying territories that had previously been uninhabitable due to predator pressure. Fire became humanity's first weapon of mass deterrence. Large predators, even the most fearsome ones, had an instinctual fear of fire that couldn't be overcome. A human group with a controlled fire could claim territory, hunt at night, and move through landscapes that would have been death traps for their fireless ancestors. This wasn't just about personal safety, it was about species expansion on a global scale. The territorial implications were revolutionary. Fire-using humans could survive in climates that would have killed their predecessors. They could venture into colder regions where fires provided essential warmth, explore caves that were previously too dark to navigate, and establish campsites in locations that offered strategic advantages rather than just shelter from predators. This expansion came with another crucial advantage. Fire-using humans could now hunt in coordinated groups at night. Many prey animals are more active after dark, and fire provided the tools necessary to track, surround, and successfully hunt these creatures. Archaeological evidence shows that fire-using groups had access to a much wider variety of animal proteins than their predecessors, contributing to better nutrition and population growth. Fire also enabled early humans to process and preserve meat more effectively. Smoking meat over fires allowed for food storage, a concept that was revolutionary for nomadic groups. For the first time, humans could kill large animals and preserve the meat for extended periods, reducing the constant pressure to hunt and allowing for more complex social activities. The combination of predator, protection, and territorial expansion created a feedback loop that accelerated human development. Safer environments meant more time for innovation, tool development, and social cooperation. Expanded territories meant access to new resources, different materials, and varied environmental challenges that spurred adaptation and learning. Perhaps no single change was more transformative than fire's ability to extend the usable day. Before fire, human activity was strictly limited by sunlight. When darkness fell, productivity stopped. Humans could do little more than huddle together, hope for safety, and wait for dawn. Fire liberated our ancestors from this fundamental constraint, effectively adding hours to every day. These extended hours weren't just about staying awake longer. They were about creating entirely new types of human activity. Archaeological evidence suggests that the first complex toolmaking, detailed planning, and sophisticated social interactions all happened around fires during evening hours. The hearth became humanity's first workshop, meeting place, and center of innovation. Fire-lit evenings also revolutionized human communication. For the first time, groups could gather after the day's survival activities were complete and engage in complex social interactions. Storytelling, skill sharing, and collaborative problem-solving all became possible during these extended hours. The flickering flames created an intimate atmosphere that encouraged closer social bonding and more sophisticated language development. The productivity gains were enormous. Humans could now work on tools, process food, plan hunts, and engage in other crucial activities during hours that had previously been lost to darkness. This wasn't just about efficiency, it was about creating time for the kinds of complex thinking that distinguish humans from other species. Fire also enabled humans to maintain constant vigilance over their environment. Guard duties could be rotated around the clock, resources could be protected continuously, and potential threats could be spotted and addressed regardless of natural lighting conditions. This 24-hour awareness gave fire-using groups massive advantages over both predators and competing human groups. Most importantly, these extended days created opportunities for leisure and reflection. For the first time in human history, our ancestors had time to think about things beyond immediate survival. They could contemplate their environment, experiment with new ideas, and develop the kind of abstract thinking that would eventually lead to art, religion, and complex social structures. The mastery of fire didn't just change how humans survived, it changed what survival meant. No longer were our ancestors simply trying to make it through another day. They were building foundations for a completely different kind of existence, one where humans could thrive rather than merely survive, and where the constraints of the natural world became challenges to overcome rather than absolute limitations to accept. The moment humans began gathering around fires, something unprecedented happened in the history of our species. We created the first true human communities. Before fire, early human groups were loose collections of individuals united, primarily by the need for mutual protection and resource sharing. But the hearth changed everything, creating a focal point that transformed scattered survivors into cohesive social units. Think about what fire represented in practical terms. It was a shared resource that required collective maintenance, a source of safety that benefited everyone, and a gathering place that encouraged face-to-face interaction. For the first time in human evolution, our ancestors had a reason to stay in one place for extended periods, and that stability became the foundation for increasingly complex social relationships. Archaeological evidence from sites like cave shows that early fire-using groups developed sophisticated social structures around fire maintenance. Someone had to collect fuel, someone had to tend the flames, and someone had to guard this precious resource from wind, rain, and potential thieves. These responsibilities created the first specialized roles in human society, moving beyond simple divisions of labor to create interdependent social positions. The psychological impact was just as revolutionary as the practical one. Fire provided humans with their first shared sacred space, a place where the group could gather safely, where important decisions were made, and where knowledge was transmitted from one generation to the next. The hearth became humanity's first institution, a central organizing principle that shaped how early humans thought about themselves and their relationships with others. This shift from individual survival to group cooperation fundamentally altered human behavior. Around fires, our ancestors learned to share resources more equitably, to make decisions collectively, and to prioritize group welfare over individual advantage. The survival of the fire became synonymous with the survival of the community, creating powerful incentives for cooperation and mutual support. Fire also created the first human spaces that were truly controlled environments. Unlike caves or natural shelters, firelit areas were human creations that could be modified, improved, and customized to meet group needs. This sense of environmental control fostered a new kind of confidence and creativity that would eventually lead to the development of complex human settlements and the domestication of landscapes. The social dynamics around fire were particularly transformative for human communication. The intimate atmosphere created by flickering flames encouraged closer personal interactions, while the extended evening hours provided time for complex conversations that would have been impossible during daylight survival activities. These firelit gatherings became the birthplace of human culture as we know it. Around those ancient fires, something magical happened that would define human culture for millennia to come. We began telling stories, not just simple information sharing about where to find food or how to avoid predators, but complex narratives that transmitted values, preserved knowledge, and created shared cultural identities that bound groups together across generations. The connection between fire and storytelling wasn't accidental. Fire created the perfect environment for narrative communication, an intimate circle of faces illuminated by dancing flames, a safe space where guards could be lowered, and extended evening hours when survival activities were complete. The rhythmic crackling of burning wood became humanity's first soundtrack, providing a mesmerizing backdrop for the world's first entertainment. Archaeological evidence suggests that the development of complex language accelerated dramatically. After humans mastered fire, the need to coordinate fire maintenance required more sophisticated communication than simple hunting or gathering, but it was the storytelling opportunities that really drove language evolution. Around fires, our ancestors developed the vocabulary, grammar, and narrative structures that would eventually produce literature, philosophy, and complex abstract thinking. These early stories weren't just entertainment, they were survival tools as essential as spears or stone knives. Stories preserved crucial knowledge about seasonal patterns, dangerous territories, successful hunting techniques, and medicinal plants. In a world without writing, the human memory became the ultimate storage device, and stories provided the organizational framework that made complex information retrieval possible. But perhaps most importantly, stories created the first human cultures. Groups that shared the same narratives developed shared values, beliefs, and behavioral expectations. Stories about heroic ancestors created role models for young people to emulate. Tales about group origins fostered collective identity and pride. Cautionary stories about breaking social rules reinforced behavioral norms and community standards. The firelit storytelling circle also democratized human knowledge in ways that were revolutionary for their time. Unlike specialized skills that might be known only to a few individuals, stories could be shared with everyone in the group, regardless of age, gender, or social position. This broad knowledge distribution made human groups more resilient and adaptable, ensuring that crucial information wouldn't be lost if key individuals died or left the group. Firelit storytelling also created the first human art form. The combination of voice, gesture, and dramatic performance around flickering flames produced immersive experiences that were simultaneously educational and entertaining. These performances weren't just about transmitting information, they were about creating emotional connections, building group cohesion, and providing psychological relief from the harsh realities of prehistoric survival. Most significantly, storytelling around fires laid the foundation for human spirituality and abstract thinking. As our ancestors became more skilled at creating and sharing narratives, they began developing stories about things they couldn't directly observe: the origins of the world, the nature of death, the meaning of dreams. These abstract concepts, born around ancient fires, would eventually evolve into the religions, philosophies, and ideologies that continue to shape human civilization today. Fire didn't just change how humans lived, it fundamentally altered what they believed about themselves and their place in the universe. Archaeological evidence from sites across multiple continents shows that fire quickly became central to human ritual and spiritual practice, transforming from a practical tool into something sacred and symbolically powerful. The ritualization of fire appears to have developed almost simultaneously with its practical mastery. Early humans created special fire lighting ceremonies, designated sacred fires that were kept burning continuously, and developed elaborate protocols for fire maintenance and sharing. These weren't just practical considerations, they were the first human religious practices, reflecting a deep spiritual connection to this transformative technology. Fire rituals served multiple functions that were crucial for early human societies. They created shared experiences that bonded groups together, established cultural traditions that distinguished one group from another, and provided frameworks for marking important life transitions like births, deaths, and coming-of-age ceremonies. The fire ceremony became humanity's first church service. Wedding, celebration, and funeral rite all rolled into one. The psychological impact of fire ritual was profound and lasting. Humans who participated in fire ceremonies developed a sense of connection to something larger than themselves, whether that was the group, the ancestors, or supernatural forces. This spiritual dimension of fire use fostered the development of human consciousness and self-awareness in ways that purely practical activities couldn't match. Fire also became central to human identity formation. Groups developed distinctive fire lighting techniques, unique ceremonial practices, and specific beliefs about fire's spiritual properties. These cultural markers helped early humans distinguish between us and them, creating the first tribal identities that would eventually evolve into complex ethnic and national affiliations. The sacred nature of fire created powerful social incentives for cooperation and group loyalty. Allowing a sacred fire to die out became one of the most serious failures possible in early human societies, often resulting in exile or death. This extreme response reflected fire's central role in group survival, but it also demonstrates how practical necessities became invested with profound spiritual significance. Fire rituals also provided early humans with their first experiences of transcendence and altered consciousness. The combination of rhythmic chanting, hypnotic mochin, and smoke inhalation created trance-like states that our ancestors interpreted as spiritual experiences. These altered states became the foundation for shamanic practices and religious traditions that persist in human cultures today. Most importantly, fire rituals created the first human experiences of the sacred, the sense that some things are more important than immediate practical concerns and deserve reverence, protection, and special treatment. This capacity for recognizing and responding to sacred experiences would eventually lead to the development of art, music, literature, and all the other cultural achievements that distinguish humans from other species. The transformation of fire, from accidental discovery to sacred symbol, represents one of the most significant developments in human cultural evolution. Around those ancient flames, our ancestors didn't just learn to survive more effectively, they learned to be human, in ways that continue to shape our species today. The fire that once terrified them became the foundation for everything we recognize as human civilization. The mastery of fire didn't just change how humans survived, it became the foundation for every technological advancement that followed. What started as a tool for warmth and cooking evolved into humanity's first laboratory, workshop, and manufacturing center. The controlled flame became the gateway to a technological revolution that would transform our species from tool-using animals into the architects of complex civilizations. The first breakthrough came when early humans discovered that fire could transform materials in ways that were previously impossible. Heat treatment of stones made them easier to shape and sharpen, creating superior tools and weapons. But this was just the beginning. Archaeological evidence from sites dating back hundreds of thousands of years shows that fire-using humans quickly learned to manipulate clay, creating the first pottery and eventually developing the techniques that would lead to metallurgy. Asterisk, the leap from fire maintenance to metalworking represents one of the most significant cognitive advances in human history. Our ancestors had to understand not just how to create and control fire, but how different materials responded to different temperatures, how to maintain consistent heat for extended periods, and how to manipulate molten metals into useful shapes. This required abstract thinking, planning, and experimentation on a scale that had never existed before. Copper working, which emerged around 7,000 years ago, was humanity's first venture into true metallurgy. But the principles had been developing for millennia around countless fires where early humans experimented with heating different materials. The discovery that certain rocks could be transformed into malleable metals was revolutionary. But it was built on hundreds of thousands of years of fire-based experimentation and learning. The social implications of advanced fire technology were just as significant as the practical ones. Metalworking required specialized knowledge, dedicated time, and access to specific materials. This created the first true craftsmen, individuals whose value to the group came not from hunting or gathering, but from their ability to create tools and weapons that others couldn't make. These specialists became the first professionals in human history, trading their products for food, protection, and social status. Fire-based technology also enabled the development of increasingly complex tools and weapons. Bronze weapons were superior to stone ones in every measurable way. They were sharper, more durable, and could be repaired rather than replaced. This technological advantage gave fire-using groups enormous advantages in both hunting and warfare, accelerating the spread of fire-based technologies across human populations. But perhaps most importantly, fire-based technology created the first human manufacturing processes. Instead of simply finding and modifying natural materials, humans could now create entirely new substances with properties that didn't exist in nature. This leap from adaptation to creation marked the beginning of human technological civilization and set the stage for every industrial advancement that would follow. Fire didn't just enable agriculture, it made it inevitable. The same humans who had learned to control flames for cooking and protection discovered that fire could be used to clear land, improve soil fertility, and manage plant growth in ways that dramatically increased food production. This agricultural revolution, built on fire-based land management, became the foundation for permanent human settlements and the rise of complex civilizations. The connection between fire and agriculture was revolutionary in its simplicity and effectiveness. Controlled burns could clear large areas of land quickly, eliminate competing vegetation, and create ash that served as natural fertilizer. Early farmers learned to use fire to manage entire landscapes, creating the first human-designed ecosystems that maximized food production while minimizing labor investment. Archaeological evidence from sites across the globe shows that fire-based agriculture developed independently in multiple locations, suggesting that the transition from hunter-gatherer to farmer was a natural progression for fire-using humans. The same skills required to maintain cooking fires, understanding fuel types, controlling burn rates, and managing heat distribution translated directly to agricultural land management. The surplus food production enabled by fire-based agriculture created the first opportunity for permanent human settlements. When humans could produce more food than they needed for immediate survival, they could afford to invest time and energy in building permanent structures, developing specialized skills, and creating complex social organizations. Villages, towns, and eventually cities all grew from the agricultural surplus that fire-based farming made possible. This agricultural revolution also fundamentally changed human social structure. For the first time in human history, not everyone needed to be directly involved in food production. Some individuals could specialize in toolmaking, others in trade, and still others in governance and social coordination. This specialization created the first complex societies and laid the groundwork for the development of civilization as we know it. Fire-based agriculture also enabled dramatic population growth. Communities that could produce agricultural surpluses could support larger populations, creating the first human settlements with hundreds or even thousands of residents. These larger populations became centers of innovation, trade, and cultural development, accelerating the pace of human advancement in ways that would have been impossible for smaller hunter-gatherer groups. The environmental impact of fire-based agriculture was equally transformative. Humans became the first species capable of deliberately reshaping entire landscapes to meet their needs. Forests were cleared, grasslands were managed, and water sources were redirected to support agricultural production. This environmental manipulation gave humans unprecedented control over their food supply and created the foundation for the complex civilizations that would emerge over the following millennia. Most importantly, fire-based agriculture created the first human experience of true abundance. For the first time in evolutionary history, humans could produce more food than they needed for immediate survival. This abundance freed human creativity and ambition in ways that would have been impossible during the constant struggle for survival that characterized pre-agricultural life. The journey from accidental fire discovery to complex civilization wasn't just about technology, it was about the fundamental transformation of human consciousness and capability. Every aspect of what we recognize as modern civilization can be traced back to those first humans who chose to approach the flames rather than flee from them. That single act of curiosity over fear set in motion a chain of development that would ultimately reshape the entire planet. Consider the scope of this transformation. Fire-enabled cooking, which supported brain development and complex social structures. Fire provided protection and extended working hours, which enabled innovation and cultural development. Fire made metallurgy possible, which created superior tools and weapons. Fire enabled agriculture, which supported permanent settlements and population growth. Each of these developments built upon the previous ones, creating an accelerating cycle of advancement that continues to this day. The psychological transformation was equally profound. Fire-using humans developed a fundamentally different relationship with their environment than their predecessors. Instead of simply adapting to natural conditions, they learned to modify and control those conditions to meet their needs. This shift from adaptation to manipulation became the defining characteristic of human civilization and the foundation for every technological advancement that followed. Fire mastery also created the first human experience of true power over nature. Humans who could create light in darkness, warmth in cold, and transform raw materials into useful tools developed a confidence and ambition that was unprecedented in the natural world. This psychological transformation was perhaps as important as the practical advantages that fire provided, creating the mindset that would eventually lead to space exploration, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence. The social implications of fire mastery continue to shape human civilization today. The cooperation required for fire maintenance created the first complex human organizations. The specialization enabled by fire-based technology created the first professional classes. The surplus production made possible by fire-based agriculture created the first opportunities for leisure, art, and intellectual development. Every aspect of modern society can be traced back to innovations that emerged from humanity's relationship with fire. Fire also created the first human experience of technological dependence. Once humans became accustomed to cooked food, artificial light, and fire-based tools, they could no longer survive without these technologies. This dependence on human-created tools and systems became the defining characteristic of human civilization and established the pattern of technological dependence that continues to accelerate in modern times. Most remarkably, the accidental discovery of fire control created a feedback loop that continues to drive human advancement today. Each fire-based innovation enabled new discoveries, which led to new technologies, which created new possibilities for further advancement. This cycle of innovation and improvement, which began around ancient cooking fires, has become the engine of human progress and the foundation for our species' continued evolution. The story of fire mastery is ultimately the story of human potential realized. Those early humans who reached toward the flames instead of away from them didn't just discover a useful tool, they discovered their own capacity for transformation, innovation, and control over their environment. Every airplane, computer, skyscraper, and smartphone is a direct descendant of that first controlled fire. Proof that human curiosity and determination can overcome any obstacle and transform any challenge into an opportunity for advancement. The next time you flip a light switch, start your car or cook dinner, Remember that you're participating in a story that began nearly 800,000 years ago with a single act of courage. Our ancestors' decision to approach fire instead of flee from it wasn't just about survival, it was about choosing curiosity over fear, innovation over tradition, and possibility over limitation. Fire didn't just change how humans lived, it changed what it meant to be human. From that first controlled flame emerged everything we recognize as civilization. Our technology, our social structures, our capacity for art and abstract thinking, and our ability to reshape the world around us. The mastery of fire was humanity's first step toward becoming the dominant species on Earth, and it remains the foundation for every advancement that has followed. What fascinates me most about this story is how it demonstrates the power of human curiosity and determination. Those early humans had every reason to fear fire. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and potentially deadly. But they chose to investigate, experiment, and eventually master this force of nature. That same spirit of inquiry and innovation continues to drive human progress today, leading us toward discoveries and achievements that would seem magical to our fire-wielding ancestors. So, here's my question for you. What fires in your own life are you running from instead of approaching? What challenges or opportunities are you avoiding because they seem too dangerous or difficult? The story of fire mastery reminds us that the greatest breakthroughs often come from facing our fears and choosing curiosity over comfort. Our ancestors changed the world by reaching toward the flames. What might you discover if you did the same? If this journey through human history sparked your curiosity, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed exploring how a single discovery can reshape everything, consider subscribing because human history is full of these pivotal moments where courage and curiosity combine to change the world forever.